Welcome to the Fieldnotes Podcast, presented by Seaworthy Functional Medicine. Seaworthy exists to help you overcome your complex health challenges so you can be fully vital. Now, here's your host, Dr. Rob Downey.
What do we need to know about how the environment and things in the environment affect our health, including things that get a lot of attention now, like mold and other not so well appreciated things? Today, we are so fortunate to be joined by Jenny Johnson, who is an expert both personally and professionally. Jenny, thanks for your time today.
Absolutely. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I was really just struck by how much experience you have looking at your qualifications and experience, background in biology, and then a whole bunch of the folks I think of as kind of the big hitters in environmental toxicity have informed your work. And so two that two that really stand out, you're a coach, but you're a multi-certified coach, which is a pretty big deal in terms of your toolkit from my perspective. And so some of it has to do with the work of Dr. Richard Shoemaker, who pioneered our understanding of mold toxins and how they can mess with us, but also Dr. Bredesen, who pioneered preventing and reversing neurodegenerative disease, Alzheimer's. And we've had folks in my clinic, a number of them have pre-dementia or early dementia, and his work influenced then how they were able to have reversal in a really rural setting like this without as many resources as other places. And then a lot of folks I take care of, they would have been stuck without the work of Dr. Richard Shoemaker. So I just feel so fortunate that the way they've illuminated things is in part how you and I can show up for people. Do you think that's accurate?
Absolutely. Those two men are two of my greatest heroes, personally and professionally. And it was interesting. I just attended a conference about a month ago. It was the annual CIRS X conference, and they were both the keynote speakers. They shared
Wow.
the keynote label to have Dr. Richie Shoemaker and Dr. Dale Bredesen in the room together. I just had to stand up and show my
Yeah.
gratitude for both of those
Yeah.
pioneers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing work they're both doing.
Mm. Well, it is often helpful to our audience, who I thank for joining us, to hear a little bit about the genesis story of each, person on Fieldnotes, because primarily the people on the Fieldnotes podcast have superpowers, and often their superpowers are tied to their suffering.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
And for you, they can go to your website so they can kind of see the long form if they want to drill down into it. But for today's purposes, what would it help people to know about how your personal story inspired you to do this work?
Wow. Well, like you said, there's the long version, and people can contact me or find another podcast out there. Check out my website for the long version. There's a lot of good, meat in there.
Hmm.
But the short version, like you said, when we go through suffering and we get kicked out the other side better for it and kind of have learned something from it and have hope that we feel like could help others who are maybe at those early stages, you can't not get involved. And that's really what happened with me and my family. We made every single mistake in the book because we didn't know what we didn't know. When we started to get knocked down by mold exposure and Lyme disease and the way that it impacted each of our family members in a different way, when we were trying to live sustainably on a little organic farm in North Georgia, and we were living very intimately with the land and being stewards of the land and the compost and the nasty little pond that our kids swam in, and our little our wood cabin that had leaks, and the chicken coop and the straw and the moldy feed that we were exposed to every day, the ticks in the pasture, that we were surrounded by biotoxins that eventually took us all down. We were wondering, what in the world is happening to us? We're living this holistic, organic life, growing our own food, and we've got solar panels and a well, and we're doing everything right? We moved here to be healthy, and the opposite was happening. We were all getting sick. So again, long story short, we didn't know what was happening for a little while, and it took months, even years, to figure it out for different parts of our family. We eventually did figure it out, and we got 100% better, even beyond where we were before we even moved to that farm. For example, my son was born, we would say, autistic, neurodivergent, but the version of neurodivergence that you don't want to accommodate, you want to try to fix. I know that there's a lot these days about that being something kind of to celebrate and to accommodate, and there's a place for that, absolutely. But he was not able to function very well in society, and we had partly moved to the farm to help him thrive in a place that didn't put those kinds of social pressures and anxieties on him. Little did I know that he would worsen in that environment from the biotoxin exposures, but that getting out of that environment and going through some medical treatment to remove the toxins that he had taken in and to support his little body would not only clear up some of the acute, worsening symptoms that he had while we were on that farm, but they cleared up what we'll call his neurodivergent symptoms that he was born with. And so that's just a story. If this news that our family had to go through and the suffering that we went through to learn it, gave me that idea, or that gives us all that hope that deep conditions can be reversed or significantly reduced and minimized. That's a hope that I want all parents, all people out there to have. Hey, continue to look under the hood if something doesn't seem right for one of your family members, because it's very possible that something's going on that is treatable, and we can free our family members into living a better version of themselves than would have otherwise been possible. Would have otherwise been possible. Also, my husband, he was on disability. He was bedbound and on disability for about 3 or 4 years with Lyme disease. And had I not known about mold and the aspect of water damage building exposure, he would have just plateaued and still been on disability. But when we learned about Dr. Richie Shoemaker's work, that if you are trying to recover from Lyme disease in a moldy house and you have certain genetics, that may not go very well. And so when we got him out of that home that had water damage into a cleaner home and supported his body with some binders, he not only got off disability, he's now running multiple companies, racing mountain bikes again. And so, wow, we could have settled for a version of our family's life that was much different than what we are all enjoying now. And I think that's really good news that I can't not share with the world. So that's my Genesis story, our family's radical remission, we'll call it radical healing, into optimal wellness. And I want to hold that hope out for others.
Thank you so much. It's definitely the reason I tell many, many people I have the best job in medicine, because of these outcomes. And all the way back in 2005, I saw a remarkable outcome from psoriatic arthritis via functional medicine. And when I saw that toolkit deployed and make a huge difference in somebody who was failing drugs and getting pneumonia and their white cells were crashing, it just stood out to me so much. I said, I have to have that toolkit.
Yeah.
And since then, I've finally sort of learned why a lot of conventional providers don't get this toolkit, because it seems obvious when you and I have seen what we've seen. Many of us we would come to the service-driven conclusion that we have to show up for others the way we were showed up for, and we know that the odds are not in people's favor. But I finally realized there's this cognitive dissonance that conventional providers, if they look at what might not be working, it can feel to them like a whole house of cards is going to come down in terms of their confidence to show up and treat anything. So I've really deepened my compassion, but I think thankfully there's a way forward. For me, it was Institute for Functional Medicine training. There's brilliant coaching, which you are multi-certified in. So a couple of things today I think are super, super important. One is I want to see if I've got this right, but there's so much science around the genetics of mold exposure, how much or how little we can antibody tag and clear things. Do we or don't we have Lyme disease, Borrelia burgdorferi, and co-infections like babesiosis? And when I knew we were going to get to do this today, one of my really burning questions for you, we're going to talk about how people would recognize it and what to do, but thankfully you're there. The good news about Fieldnotes is we talk to people and they can go work with you. So I love that. I just love that it's essentially kind of an archive of resources.
Yeah.
But how are people able to do this with a coach if they're intimidated by, oh, I'm going to have HLA-DR testing, and I'm going to have to see if I'm spilling toxins in my urine. I'm going to have my environment tested. I might have to change my workplace, my home. Uh, the test for Lyme disease and co-infections can be misinterpreted, false positives, false negatives. How do people get past that intimidation point?
As far as working with a coach, it's really because I don't work in a vacuum. I've got to collaborate with other people. And I
Mhm.
think even on the clinician side, the medical providers probably should be working with a team too, because these
Mhm.
are really complex illnesses, and to try to take it on without a village, supporting yourself and your patients can be really hard.
Mhm.
So a lot of people will come to me. I may be more accessible than medical doctors as a first step. If someone says, "Hey, I think I might have this. What are there any screening tools that I could do? Or are there any direct to patient labs I could do? Or how could I just test my home? Or what are some of the symptoms? How much does it cost to get in with the doctor?" They kind of want to test the waters, and I'm a safe
Mhm.
place to do that. So I provide a
Mhm.
lot of entry level education and support and screening tools to help people figure out, is it worth it to get in with a medical provider who can bring out some of the big guns and do the fancy Lyme tests and really interpret those results
Mhm.
properly and fairly, prescribe the medications they may need that's outside of my scope of practice. So I'm kind of the entryway, and then I remain their support person throughout that process. So they may leave me and go work with a doctor, and they're on that process of diagnosis and treatment. But what they often find is, oh my goodness, there's a lot here. And I only get to meet with my doctor every other month. And it's like drinking from a fire hose every time we have an appointment. And there's just so much I need to do. They come back. And that's where I, as a coach, I don't change the treatment plan, but I help
Mhm.
them actually implement it and understand it, own it and feel empowered by it, really, rather than overwhelmed by it. And so then I'm their accountability partner, working with them and with the doctor, helping them actually do what they're being asked to do, because otherwise it can be so overwhelming that some people just they tap out and they don't do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that's one of my favorite roles, is being that support person. And then I'll bring in some of the lifestyle stuff that I think functional
Mhm.
medicine doctors, we're on the same page with. Hey, this is also a great time to be optimizing your sleep and to be managing stress. Let's pay attention to your relationships and your spiritual health. And you don't have to have a medical license for that. I'm a physical therapist and a functional medicine health coach. Those things are really up my alley. So when it's the right time to be supporting people's inner terrain with
Mhm.
some of those those strengthening factors to help people build resilience and capacity, that's one of my favorite things to do with people when they're ready.
Could not endorse that more heartily, that the coaching is, I would almost go so far as to say, it's mission critical for anybody who's up against things of the seriousness and magnitude of what we're talking about today.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
anybody listening, just sort of presume you're going to need somebody like Jenny, and you can't supplement and drug your way out of a lifestyle deficiency, and you can't lifestyle your way out of a mental, emotional, spiritual hole. And so you're
yeah.
going to have your native vitality for your body to know the way and reboot no matter what fancy footwork you do with your labs and drugs and
Yep,
supplements.
absolutely.
So there's a weird thing about mold toxicity, these things that are released by mold to protect themselves that can get into us. And you have this broader part you're going to share today about things in the environment in general. So let's segue into that, but let's kind of do two things at once. How would you characterize the state of the world we live in now? And you already described a perfect storm, this this place you live, that had all of these things messing with you. Wow. But so many people have these exposures and don't know it. So please characterize sort of what's going on, but also how people would know to be suspicious versus
Yeah,
just they're bummed out and stressed out from work, or they're just tired
right,
because of contemporary living. How do they know to drill
right.
down more here?
Yeah, great question. So environmental toxins or toxicants in general, that's a really broad category. Everything from agricultural chemicals, heavy metals, junk that's in our water. What I'm mostly focusing on, while all of those things are important, my wheelhouse is mostly in the biotoxin category. And those 80% of what we consider biotoxins come from a water damaged building. And a lot of people will say, well, okay, so mold, right? And yes, mold is a huge part of the microbial soup that's in a water damaged building. But there's bacteria, there are chemical and microbial VOCs, there are beta glucans, hemolysins, all kinds of it really is a toxic soup of things that happen as our building is actually being degraded by microbes and other things that are trying to break down our building when it gets wet. And because our buildings are built out of paper, pretty much, which is microbial food. So, what I didn't realize, and I think what so many people out there didn't realize, is that yes, while mold and bacteria are natural and that they can be found in the woods, the type that are found in water damaged building and the concentration and the balance of microbes that are found in this indoor man-made environment tend to be a lot more toxigenic than what we're just going to run into when we're on a walk in the woods. When you're having paint and certain, again, man-made products degrading the stuff that gets put into our air besides just mycotoxins, which are mold toxins, it really is just a whole bunch of pollutants in our indoor air. And so there are things outside of water damaged buildings. About 20% of people who get sick with chronic inflammatory response syndrome, they get it from a different kind of environmental biotoxin, such as one associated with Lyme disease or Babesia, Bartonella, other vector-borne illnesses that you brought up. Brown recluse spiders have a venom that is a biotoxin that some people recirculate and can get very sick from. Blue-green algae that's in some stagnant ponds is another one. Various dinoflagellates, Pfiesteria, things that are in, like estuaries and other bodies of water that we can acquire from eating certain fish or swimming in certain areas. Again, these are all biological microorganisms that about 24% of the population just tends to not really deal with very well. And kind of like long COVID, some people get COVID and they don't have the sequelae of these long-term symptoms. Other people can get the very same illness and they end up just sort of not feeling well for a long time. Chronic inflammatory response syndrome is very similar, where we get exposed to a biotoxin that it triggers this whole cascade of physiological events downstream where we can become chronically ill and not even realize it was from an exposure to blue-green algae at a pond one summer, or that water damaged building that we stayed in at summer camp, or a kid's school, or that tick bite we had, a year ago. But if we trace our timeline back, or our clinician helps us do that, sometimes we can find what it was and put those pieces together.
So good. Yeah, such a great, lucid, granular characterization. I realized getting ready for today, we wanted to, I wanted folks to know inflammation comes up a lot, and many of our audience know that functional medicine medical providers, according to, one way to think of them is inflammologists, right?
Right.
But so many people still think I hit my thumb with a hammer, that's inflammation. When my thumb's not red and painful anymore, I'm not inflamed. And we're talking about the exact opposite. We're talking about
Right.
either a silent or uh, unrecognized process where inflammatory cascades are triggered. Uh, and all of this, there's no villain here. These things in the environment, they release these chemicals to protect their niche in the environment. And then we're bystander casualties, these things
Right.
bioaccumulating. So there's no villain. We're just in the milieu,
Right.
but we can pay a heavy price for not knowing where we're getting taxed.
It's true.
And then the inflammation can wreak havoc because it's systemic, it's insidious, and it's self-reiterating.
Right.
And I try not to use militaristic analogies anymore. Like many males, I was really prone to that in my 20s, and I talk more about ecosystems in nature now and less about military metaphors. But the immune and inflammatory systems really have to be characterized as most similar to surveillance, recognition, target, and destroy teams. I mean, that's really, we have this kind
Yeah.
of unending pseudo battle just reiterating us until we stop the cycle. I mean, do you think those are accurate characterizations of what people are up against? And, if I'm mischaracterizing, let's reframe this because
Yeah,
you're an
no,
expert.
I think you said that really well. And I haven't heard the term inflammologist. Yeah, we're looking for inflammation, right? Because that is the root cause of so many chronic diseases. And when we're talking about chronic inflammatory response syndrome, the name given by Dr. Richie Shoemaker to this biotoxin illness, or mold illness, or whatever we want to call it, we can tell that chronic inflammation is at the root there. And you're right. Some people may feel puffy and red and have sore joints and feel swollen, things that we might or have rashes, things that we might associate with classic inflammation. But a lot of my clients don't have those kinds of symptoms. They don't have external signs that they would associate with that. And they have things like difficulty thinking. They have depression and anxiety. They have panic attacks. They have difficulty sleeping. They have numbness and tingling and shooting pains. They have urinary frequency, but not diabetes. They have a metallic taste in their mouth. They get tinnitus. These aren't things that that the layman necessarily would say, oh, that's inflammation. We'd say, oh, that's
Hmm.
something neurological, or that's a cognitive issue, gut stuff. There's another one. A lot of
Hmm.
people have various gut issues. Oh, you need to go see a gastroenterologist or maybe a nutritionist, not thinking that it could be a systemic inflammatory condition. So you're right that this low grade chronic inflammation really can be a silent killer and go kind of under the radar for many of us and even clinicians.
Hmm.
So I like the way that you shared that. Absolutely.
And you did allude to it, but I say more than about why folks would be suspicious. One would be uh, you you buy a home in Georgia with a toxic pond and all this stuff, and everybody gets sick, right? I mean, you make a change in your circumstance and everybody gets sick. That's ding, ding, ding. Got to
Right.
think about this. Weird constellations out of proportion to expected, I think, ought to
Right.
really make people think
Absolutely.
about touching base with you,
Yep.
saying, hey, this feels weird, severe. I'm not getting answers to other settings.
Yeah.
Or again, that I'd have a neurologic condition and a gut condition and a joint condition and not be able to balance my checkbook.
Right. Right.
Uh,
Right.
but what are other ways for people to think about why to be suspicious and what to do next?
Yeah, well, I think what you just said was key. A lot of my clients come in with this basket of diagnoses that are all true, but no one has put them together for them and saying, actually, this is one thing, or maybe two things.
Hmm.
There's a giant umbrella label for all of these different symptoms. You don't just have migraines and chronic fatigue syndrome and SIBO and tinnitus. You have chronic inflammatory response syndrome, and there's a treatment plan that will impact all of these things downline. So I think that's one thing, like you just said, if you have a variety of symptoms that seem separate, but your spidey sense is saying these have got to be connected. Listen to those spidey senses, absolutely. And especially if they came on, go back in your timeline and pay attention to, when did things worsen? Was there an environmental event, meaning you just moved into a new house and then you started getting these migraines? Maybe your kids started getting rashes, your husband started getting runny nose, and then before long, like a year or two in later, everyone's feeling worse rather than better, and you can trace it back to moving into that new house. Or maybe you remodeled a house and you didn't really notice that there was some mold under the bathroom sink, the kitchen sink, under some flooring, or the renovators didn't tell you, you didn't know. But ever since that renovation or that remodel, people in your family haven't been feeling well. um Also, post COVID, if you've had an illness, an acute illness like COVID or pneumonia or Epstein Barr, even an acute version of something, and then ever since you just haven't been well, let's pay attention to that timeline, because sometimes those acute illnesses are the trigger for SIRS, for the genetic component of SIRS. And we don't all have the genetic component, but for those of us who do, any gene that can be upregulated can be downregulated, which is good news. But we have to ask, what upregulated this gene and maybe made us not tolerate our home all of a sudden. So I think too, there are a lot of families who have kids with acute neurological symptoms that start almost overnight. PANS and PANDAS. A lot of people are hearing about what these conditions are. Pay attention to that. If your kid changed like literally overnight, keep digging for root causes and answers. That's another one that we see as strongly connected with an environmental exposure. If a doctor is saying, this is all just menopause, or this is all just, just this, or just stress, that's another one I hear. And they're getting close because both menopause and stress do impact a lot of systems in our body. And so they're seeing, hey, this is multisystemic. It's probably menopause or stress. But deep to that, there could actually be an organic cause that's even bigger. And so listen to your spidey senses. If you feel like there's something going on and no one's quite helped you put it together, keep looking, connect with me, connect with Dr. Downey. It's possible that there's an environmental trigger that is deep to all of these other diagnoses that you've been given.
I love this deep strata way you're characterizing it because then folks can also have this takeaway, which I think was best summarized by Dr. Bland, Dr. Jeffrey Bland, the father of functional medicine. He just said, and naturopathic medicine too, the body knows the way. Normal aging, normal menopause, normal menopause. It's very little change over time. And he just cites the story of his uncle who was in his 80s or 90s playing games with the family, 3 to 4 hour sessions with cards in the evening. Dr. Bland's story, not mine, but it's in his book, The Disease Delusion, sort of about
Great book.
what's under the hood, functional medicine. And his uncle said, yeah, I think I might be about to die. And everybody said, wow, noted. And then 2 weeks later, he died in his sleep.
And that's what we all want, right?
It's just a terrific quality of life, a little ramp every decade, little ramp,
right?
Maybe a little word finding challenge once in a while, a little tired at the end of the day, a nap here and there, and then off you go. And his point was that's how we're built. That's our birthright. That's our native design. And so anything other than that should make us ask ourselves, do I have the resources I need to be vital? And am I being taxed in some fashion I don't appreciate that I can deal with? And what you're saying is, ask yourself that question if you don't have an answer. Another great compass heading, and find someone. Find someone you trust and work through it, because
absolutely.
That's
Can I share another one, Dr. Downey? I just thought of this one, and this is important. I want people to hear this. But brain inflammation is one of the biggest kind of categories or symptoms of SIRS and toxic exposures. And you brought up like maybe some word finding difficulties, and there can be a variety of reasons for that. But if you feel like this is kind of coming out of nowhere, it's more extreme than it should be for where you are in the aging process. These word finding difficulties, memory issues, difficulty assimilating new knowledge, feeling confused. Often my clients describe it as brain fog. When I was sick, I described it as pushing thoughts through sludge. I felt like it was so hard to have a thought, like there was a resistance in my brain. It really felt like inflammation. And trying to put a sentence together or organize a task was so difficult. And I was in my 40s. It shouldn't have been that way. And then similarly, the mental health aspect of our brain health, if you have out of the blue, really not connected to circumstances, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, where you feel like your brain has been hijacked, you feel almost possessed, look for an answer. So many of my clients feel this weird rage, panic, anxiety, suicidalness that it's not their personality and it's not their circumstances. They don't want to be feeling these things. They literally feel like something has come and put dark glasses over their eyes and made them see the whole world in this way that is not their norm. that's not okay. And
Mhm.
and look for root causes. One of them could be toxic exposures. It's a horrible dark pit to be in, and you can get out. There is light, and it's not that difficult to get out and to detox your brain and to get your
Mm,
life back and your personality back.
Thank you so much. Yeah. A, just thank you. And B, that very much fits with what I took away from learning about and using Dr. Bredesen's approach. Same
Yeah.
thing. The brain knows the way. The brain is capable of being fully
Yeah.
resilient, plastic, vital, restoring itself. So let's presume people are getting they're sensing then the scaffolding here, how this works. They can connect with you. There's assessments. There's a clearinghouse of sorts to connect with the resources they need. So what's it going to feel like them to work with you, right? What are the sorts of things that happen when people are rolling? What would they expect? Because that's going to characterize what people need to know about how folks heal. And is it
Mhm.
surprising? Do they work where they think they're going to work? Or like many coaches, do you say, hey, you think it's about food, but we got to start with stress? I mean, that's our coach here, right? Her quip
Yeah.
is everybody I send thinks it's about food, and everybody she works with ends up managing
Yeah.
stress.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. It depends a little bit on the client and kind of where they are. I use a new client questionnaire with all kinds of,
Hmm.
rate how you feel in this area and this area. And as a physical therapist, and probably you as a medical doctor in the allopathic field, we were trained to go with what's wrong first rather than digging into what's going well and maybe utilizing that as a strength and a source of empowerment. And so for a lot of my clients, I like to talk about what's going well first and
Hmm.
celebrate that. And so if they say, okay, I'm rating my gut health and my relationship with food is in the tank. I can't exercise right now. I'm too tired. All my relationships are in the tank because I don't have energy for friends anymore. Um, but maybe they're sleeping great. Okay, let's dig into why they're sleeping so great and celebrate that and maybe use that as a strength. Let's keep doing that because that right now is your superpower and that can pull these other areas in. So we don't want to lose your sleep while we focus on some of these other areas. So sometimes we'll bring in the strengths approach. Sometimes we'll dig into what feels the weakest right now. It really depends on what that client is most needing and their personality. But I agree with what you said about your coach. The nervous system, it's kind of like it's a river flowing through us that can influence everything. Well, honestly, so many things are. So is gut health, so is sleep. But if we're in a nervous system state that is not conducive to digestion, not conducive to tissue healing, not conducive to getting good sleep, then we can be doing all of the hacks with our gut
Hmm.
health and our sleep. But if our
Hmm.
nervous system is in the sympathetic state because we're anxious, we're overwhelmed, we're upset, we're fearful, then we're pushing a boulder up a hill. So
Hmm.
it makes sense to start with let's learn to get to know our nervous system. What does it feel like to be in fight or flight? What does it feel like to be in the freeze state?
Hmm.
And what does it feel like to be in what I call the green zone, the rest and digest and heal? And so I'll teach my clients a lot of different tools to feel the different states and then to determine where do you spend most of your time. Most of my clients go back and forth between fight and flight and freeze, fight and flight and freeze. And they're not spending a lot of time in that rest and digest. And that really is where healing is going to happen the most.
Hmm.
And so, bringing in, when the time is right, bringing in tools where they can learn how to shift their nervous system. That's really fun. That's one of my favorite things to do where I put on kind of my physical therapy hat and my coaching hat and kind of personalize a nervous system toolbox for somebody and meet with them every week or every 2 weeks to see how it's going. And we might use breath work, meditation, visualization, heart math, somatic practices, a variety of things, depending again on what they're inclined to do to help them get in touch with that superpower of shifting their own nervous system. I think that's a great place to start. And then from there, once we've got that, we can focus on sleep, we can focus on gut health and what they're eating, relationships, spirituality. As an environmental specialist, I've got to bring in the outer environment too. So talking about let's see if you're breathing in clean air as you're practicing your meditation and your breath work. Are you
Hmm.
breathing in a lot of toxins? That's going to be an obstacle to healing. Or are you
Hmm.
breathing clean air? So I'll have people do some dust sampling, do some investigation of their home to make sure that their air and their water and their food that they're taking in every day are their friends and not their foes. So really just setting the foundation on all of those levels with clean air, clean water, food, nervous system, sleep, movement, so that all the amazing protocols that you and other medical doctors are doing, like with medications and supplements and all kinds of other things, they're going to take root because the
Hmm.
soil, their inner soil is ready. It's been cultivated, right? And so just
Yeah.
all they need is a seed and water, and it's going to take. So
Yeah.
that's really my goal is to complement the work of a medical doctor, with all of the lifestyle, mindset, and external environmental tools that people need to get well.
Thank you. Want to have our folks know some things that may be helpful to kind of highlight and underscore some things there. So one is that when you work with somebody of Jenny's caliber, because clearly you're the real deal, not that you need my validation, but I get to talk to a lot of people, and the people who are best at what they do what you do, which is they've got the insight, the passion, but they sequence things in a way when people get ground back, they hold it.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
I'm saddened by the fact that not everybody who cares about what you and I care about does it well. That's just
Right.
the reality. And it's sort of part of the frustration now is there's a lot of charismatic individuals that are all fired up about their take, but they haven't
Yeah.
necessarily gotten trained and humbled by the process to the point where I think they can show up most effectively. Because I would
Yeah.
say this work is very humbling. It's almost endlessly
Yeah.
humbling. And
Yeah.
anyhow, the sequencing is so important because also there are public health ramifications of what you and I do. Classic example is just everybody should have the privilege of living and working in a clean home and a clean workplace, but we don't.
Right.
But each person's plan is a tailored jacket made just for them.
Yeah.
And that's not public health at all.
Right.
And when they show up and say, I just got to start running again, I know that sweat is going to clear this yak. And you say, if your nervous system isn't in this mode, you're not going to recover from your workout. You're going to feel like garbage. You're going to get more tired. So here's this tool. And now when you sequence this tool, now you can go get that precious thing back and benefit from it. It's
Yeah.
that sequencing is all the mastery level folks do it. They sequence things in a really strategic, tactical fashion that's so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. So smart. We've got to figure out what's the root cause, what's going to give you the biggest bang for the buck as far as what's going to influence the other things, but then bringing in the subjective too. Like for the person you just mentioned, I might say, you know what, if running is a salugen, that's a term that I think I made up. Salutogen is out there, but I like the word salugen better. It's the opposite of a pathogen, right?
Yeah.
We're so good at identifying the pathogens. Let's get rid of all the bad stuff. Get rid of all the bad stuff. Well, what
Hmm.
about bringing in the things that make us feel normal and healthy and vital?
Hmm.
Even if maybe we're doing it in the wrong way or a little bit too much, or how can we bring that salugen in, something that's important to you? It's a value. It feels good. It makes you feel like a normal person. Can we modify that a little bit to be a little bit more part of, your treatment plan rather than maybe,
Hmm.
throwing things out of balance? Let's bring that in. Let's maybe run a little bit less, a little bit shorter distances, give yourself more rest time, but yes, also work with the nervous system and the sleep. So I hope that makes sense, that
Yeah.
I don't want to deprive people of the things that they love, because I think those can be part of the treatment plan.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just, it's such a blast getting to talk to you because there's so many good things, and we're doing what we set up to do while we're getting ready for today's session, which is giving people a peek into the mind of a mastery level provider of things that wouldn't occur to people. And so there's this sort of puritanical focus that if I go find the disease, if I'm really serious about that, if I really go find the icky and wrestle with the monster, I'm going to get well.
Yeah.
But if I play a board game with my family, that's not part of my therapeutic process. That's frivolous. But it could be that the social connection and the
Yeah.
immune reset and the rest and digest and the laughter and the joy and the awe and the resetting from the midbrain to the prefrontal cortex of executive function of the board game is 10 or 100 times more therapeutic.
Totally.
So those saligens are really precious, and they go back to this premise that the body knows the way. So when we send
Yes.
signals of safety, joy, abundance, it really gets into another manifestation of our birthright, which is living in an abundant world with enough of everything we need. That's how we're built. So when we
Yeah.
send those signals that that's who we are, that's how we roll, for a lot of us, it's hard coming out of a depression era family influence via, my mom and dad on the tail end of World War II. My dad had a victory garden.
Yeah.
Uh, a lot of what I've had to learn about is abundance, and a lot of my patients too, a lot of people I care about.
I love everything you just said. There's a part of me that truly believes that there's a whole nother healing flow that we could be helping ourselves and our patients, clients getting into. That's more of the energetic, spiritual, a whole nother channel. Yes, the pharmacology and the physiology and the biochemistry, all of that matters too. But when we talk about quantum physics and biofield science, the science of heart math, there's a whole nother aspect of healing when we can just jump over to living in a higher vibrational frequency. And sometimes that's the path for some of my clients. And we try to get rid of the toxins and clean up the diet and all of those things. But let's also see if we can shift our mindset and shift our joy, live in a state of gratitude. I call it prescribed pleasure. I make people like take a pleasure supplement, like
Hmm.
do things that bring you joy. It's going to raise
Hmm.
your vibrational frequency. And that too, kind of like the nervous system, it's this inner river that can tell all of our cells, hey, we're doing something different.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
let's bring that in too. It can't
Hmm.
hurt, right?
Yeah. 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 And if you're out there and you're thinking, I'm really suffering, I really want to get better, it's one of the greatest gifts
Yeah.
you can give yourself. And it's often the key. It'll often be the stuck point in my
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
I've shared this once before, but I talked to this really wonderful person, and sort of the premise of the conversation was how much they were suffering, and that they jump in front of a speeding train for their kid and do anything, and uh, and they were overdoing it. And I
Yeah.
said, will you set boundaries so that you have some time to rest? Oop, that
Mm.
might be a bridge too far.
Wow. Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, you said it just so well. So, um, well, two things then. One, will have just this chance for people to know where to find you, but anything that's important to share that we did not get to.
Um, I guess I'll just share this. This may be another question that you have, but in case it's not, if anyone is curious about what might I do next if I think my home may be part of the problem rather than part of the solution with, my health, what could I do next to figure that out? There are a few screening tools, and I'm happy to share them with you, Dr. Downey, if you want to, share them with your community. But one is a screening tool for our body that's available on my website. You can also find it at the Surviving Mold website. But I call it the SIRS screening. It's a
Hmm.
symptom assessment,
Hmm.
and then it's a visual contrast sensitivity test that people can do online. And this low level chronic inflammation from biotoxins tends to impact our optic nerve in a way that it changes the way that we see visual contrast. So shadows, light and dark contrast. And there's this cool test that people can do from the comfort of their own home on their laptop. It takes about 15 minutes and it gives you a pass fail at the end. And there's a 92% accuracy rate with just that vision test, 98.5% diagnostic accuracy rate if you do that plus the symptom questionnaire. That'll give you an idea as a screening on your body. Might I be struggling with biotoxins from my home or, my nearby environment, like a dirty pond or Lyme disease, a biotoxin?
Mhm.
And if you want to screen your home, there's a dust sample test that I recommend called the ERMI. It goes by other names too. It's a 36 species mold DNA analysis kit. You can order it from various labs online. You can just Google ERMI. You'll find various labs. I'm not affiliated with any. And you can order a test kit, and it costs maybe $250. It'll come to your home with the instructions. You put on a pair of gloves. There's a Swiffer cloth in a little like Ziploc baggie. You take it out and you just collect some dust off of elevated surfaces around your home, and you put it back in your baggies, send it off to the lab, and they'll send you a report telling you all the different molds they found and in what quantity, and not just the
Mhm.
live viral molds, but
Mhm.
even dead fragmented molds, which can still be really important because people with
Mhm.
SIRS tend to react not just to the mycotoxins or the live spores, but the cell wall fragments of even dead mold that are very
Mhm.
inflammatory. So we want to know about all the DNA of all the mold species. It's a great test. It gives you a health score called the Hurts Me Too score. We want that to be a 10 or less. If this is already overwhelming anybody, don't worry. It's on my website too, or connect with me for a quick discovery call. I'll give it to you
Mhm.
again. But it's
Mhm.
really empowering, I think, to do a test on our body, a test on our home. And if they match up and are kind of glaring, okay, let's take the
Mhm.
next step. And if they don't, it's like, no, I don't think anything is here. All right, move on to something else. It's
Mhm.
probably not your home, and that's probably good news.
Mhm.
Um, Although if it is your home, that's good news too,
Mhm.
because that means that you found a culprit and there's something that can be done. And I'm there to help you. Dr. Downey's there to help you if you find out that that's the issue as well.
Fantastic. Well, I think what we'll do is I'll let Joe Rignola, who supports me and who my audience knows. I think the best thing would be to put the links to your website
Sure.
where they can find those resources. Just because, again, I also I'm so visual, right, or sort of metaphor and analogy driven. I think a lot of the people you and I show up for, they feel like they're in this rushing torrent
Yeah.
and they hear you and I talk and they get one hand on a rock and they're kind of
Yeah.
being pulled by the current
Yeah.
and they flash on it. There was something I heard today that could change my life.
Yeah.
And I really have this goal that they can just immediately go to the resource
Right.
and get sort of eddied out
I like
before
that.
they get ripped away into the
Yeah.
current. So we'll put the links to where they can get those resources
Perfect.
on your website. And then where can they find you? Where can people find you?
My website is Simplified Wellness Designs, and there's a lot of content on there. And you can learn more about my story, more about my offerings. There's a lot of free stuff on there. You can contact me for a discovery call if you just want to connect one-on-one and share your story and learn more about my services. SimplifiedWellnessDesigns.com. If you like the idea of the salugens bringing in, I call it planting flowers in our inner garden rather than just always pulling out the weeds.
Hmm.
I have a program called Salugenics, Salugenex, Salugenics. That also means well gene expression. And so it's about inviting activities that positively influence our gene expression and also bringing in salugens. So I have a website that's called salugenics.com as well. So you can find me on social at sirs.jennyjohnson or at Simplified Wellness Designs or salugenics.com.
Super. Thanks so much. What a great conversation. I'm so happy for the people that get to learn from you today.
Well, thank you so much for hosting such a great conversation, for asking great questions, and for doing all that you do for this community.
I really appreciate it.
Great to meet you.
Likewise. Thanks for joining us for the Seaworthy podcast. Seaworthy exists to help people overcome their health challenges and be fully vital. If you think we've earned it, please consider giving this podcast a like, subscribing, and giving us a 5-star rating on the platform of your choice. Thanks.